There's a lot of things that you can say about Amazon and Rings of Power, and oh, by the way, we're definitely going to get to some of them. But one thing that I've got to say first and foremost before we get into the grim reality that is the ratings, that is their plan going forward, got to start off with a little positivity. They've been getting knocked down. They have been getting the absolute snot beat out of them with season 2. Most of the mass media reviewers have completely turned on the show. Barely anybody's watching, which we'll get into, but sign of a true competitor is the amount of times, not that you're getting knocked down, but the amount of times that you get back up. And because they purchased, in regards to them, acquiring MGM, they got the Rocky right, so they really took that Balboa speech to heart, that it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, it's about how many times you get back up, because they are still planning on 5 seasons, and why? Episode 5 of Season 2 had just dropped within the past 24 hours, at least at time of recording, and in the past couple of days, right? Because it drops, the Thursday at midnight on the East Coast, so not even Amazon really has that much faith behind it, but they're still planning for 5 seasons, but they're kind of running out of material, which is amazing when you're adapting the Second Age, because they have done something spectacular. They have managed to work in their own go-nowhere plots, but also condense, not just 1, not just 2, but thousands of years of stories that they could possibly tell, and truncated them into a season and a half of amazingly boring fantasy slop, because by the end of episode 5, they have already foretold and set up the fall of Numenor. They're already heading towards the sack of Eregion as their big 2-part battle at the conclusion of season 2. They've already created and laid the groundwork for the remaining 16 rings, the 7 for the dwarves and the 9 for the men. It's like, outside of the War of the Last Alliance, you've hit all the beats that are supposed to take multiple millennia to go through during the Second Age. Like, it's incompetent. It's amazing, right? How can you make something so cataclysmically boring and rush through all of the coolest stuff that you had available to you, but simply disregard that, condense all of that storytelling in order to just repurpose Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings and Hobbit trilogy and interject your own crap into there? It's amazing, man, but hey, they're going to have to make up a whole lot of other stuff. It's not like that's any better than the stuff that they pilfered beforehand for the remaining 3 seasons, because yeah, if you're still planning on 5 seasons, God only knows the lengths to which you're going to stretch, which you hastily set up, and what's ultimately going to happen with the Harfoots, which, oh my god, turning the Shire into some Jerusalem allegory. How the show's ultimately going to end, which I've got some ideas about how it's going to end. Basically, if you've watched Fellowship, which everybody probably should have, I'm not spoiling it because it's the first 5 minutes. It's very expeditious storytelling about the Second Age. It's not going to be Elendil and Isildur fighting Saruman at the... I'm sorry, Sauron, not Saruman. As a wizard out there in Rune, which is going to be the biggest eye-rolling, lore-breaking key jangle they can possibly think of. But no, fighting Sauron out there on the fields. They'll find a way to work Galadriel in there, and she's going to be the one to sever the One Ring from Sauron's hand. You bet your ass she will. And instead of Elrond playing Isildur to cast it into the fires of Mount Doom, that's going to be Galadriel. That's how this stuff's going to end. And also, the Proto-Harfoots are going to establish the Shire. Like, this show is such a disaster, man. And just when you think it can't get worse, it continues to get dumber. But yesterday, Amazon Prime Video shared early numbers of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power second season, trumpeting that 40 million viewers tuned in across its first 11 days. Now, we'll get to the Variety article on this, because that's ultimately what they're sourcing right here. And as you can see, that seems like quite a big number. But when you compare and contrast that with 25 million viewers in its first day and across its first, I think it was first week or first 8 or 9 days, over 100 million people tuned into the premiere, I mean, it's a bit of a drop-off. And we also looked at minutes watched, and yeah, half the viewership turned up. And it's also off the back of the data that suggests that the first season of the show had a 37% completion rate domestically and a 45% completion rate abroad. When you factor in 1.8 million minutes were watched for the for the premiere episode across 4 days, and then you compare and contrast that with 900,000 minutes watched for the premiere episode across 5 days, you do the math and you figure out that that's about a 60% drop off, give or take. How many people are actually going to be watching at the conclusion of the 5 seasons? seasons that they planned. But it's difficult to put a stat in full context, as Amazon has not defined how it qualifies its viewership. Yeah, exactly. 40 million people could simply hover over the title card and go, ugh, God, you're trying to pass that off as Lord of the Rings, huh? Well, I'm moving along and not watching that. Could 1 minute, 2 minutes, 30 seconds count as a view? Who knows? Nobody knows. However, the studio has promised similar numbers for other titles, including the first season of Rings of Power, which it touted as reaching 25 million viewers in just its first day of availability in 2022. Therefore, it illuminates a measurement of Season 2's opening weekend. The series' most recent outing appears to be significantly lagging behind its first, okay? Earlier this year, Fallout, hit 65 million viewers in 16 days, more time than accounted for the Rings of Power, and it's likely that Fallout's 11-day count would have been higher than 40 million. Yes, The Boys Season 4 saw 55 in the first 39 days, making that, I guess a future benchmark to try to put up against Rings of Power? Because you would imagine there's got to be significant crossover between, Fallout, The Boys, and Rings of Power audiences. It'll be interesting to see the drop-off there. According to Amazon, The Rings of Power Season 2 now sits among its top 5 most viewed television series ever, behind Fallout, and Season 2 of Reacher in 2022's Terminal List has bumped down to number 6. But this is a billion-dollar show, and it sits somewhere in your top 5 behind the one that you had no faith and became an overnight sensation. Interesting. Amazon also tells that tens of millions of people have viewed Season 1 of Rings of Power since early August. Right, tens of millions of people. We can't give you a definitive number, but just trust us, bro. And the series, has been on Prime Video's the #1 title since the Season 2 premiere on August 29th. I'll again, take your word for it. The studio emphasizes that an impressive amount of its viewership comes from outside the US. Right, how much? Don't know. What's impressive? Well, they also think that a 60% decline is also impressive. So I don't necessarily know if I trust you if we have comparative standards for what is and is not impressive. But Amazon studio chief Jennifer Salke memo to staff about the Rings of Power viewership. This will be interesting. It takes an endless amount of dedication and drive to deliver all the titles we've launched globally on Prime Video over the past 12 months. Our world-class teams have delivered record-breaking hit after record-breaking hit to our customers, including 4 of our top 5 TV titles of all time, as well as 2 of the top 5 films, from Return of Reacher to the incredible first season launch of Fallout, along with a remarkable growth. Get to the actual stuff that's out here, because that's just a lot of fluff. On August 29th, we launched the second season of Rings of Power. Yes, through the second week of launch, according to our key measurements, the series is showing now we have another huge hit season on our hands. Yeah, right. Because 40 million viewers does in fact sound impressive, but when you suss that out, when you get to the bottom of it, it's a significant drop-off from Season 1, which was the cause for a lot of people to not see the finale of Season 1. I'm grateful to each and every one of you for your boundless creative energy, passion, and commitment. Together, along with our talented showrunners, who are they? Did you hire new ones? J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, as well as executive producers Lindsay Weber, Justin Doble, Callum Green, Jason Cahill, and Jennifer Hutchinson. That's interesting, right? Because you have 2 writers for this abysmal show. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and including yourself, 6 producers. That not a problem. Our phenomenal cast. Who? Again, did you hire other people? Our crew and the Tolkien estate. Simon Tolkien's an idiot, but whatever. We have brought a wonderful and timeless story to a new audience. Yeah, and again, a new audience that is dwindling by the episode and is wondering how on earth are you going to make it to a 5th season. In a Hollywood Reporter piece examining the trials and tribulations of Rings of Power. No, it's great. Shut up. As well as the current soap opera drama swirling around HBO's House of Dragon, Game of Thrones creator George R.R. Martin. More on that in the next couple of days. The trade notes that a 3rd season of Rings of Power has been in the works for months. Yeah. We kind of all figured that, if they were going to pivot at all, they were going to try to correct any of the ills of the 1st and 2nd season. The 3rd season would be the first time we'd see any indication, because the first 2 seasons of this terrible show were written at about the same time. So learning from any of their follies, it would take a little while, but still, it's going to be a 2-year gap before this comes back, another huge drop off, more obvious bad will towards this show. Who's going to be watching? What's more, after seeing season 2's premieres rating, sources tell the Hollywood Reporter the company remains committed to the show's original 5-season plan despite the trade rights. Third-party services show a steep drop in ratings for the series' debut season. IO9 reached out to Prime Video to ask if there are updates on season 3 as well as whether or not the 5-season plan report is accurate. We'll update, and again, they haven't, at least at this point in time, and I would imagine that given how much money, how public they've been about the success of this show, even if, okay, like you get a full season 3, what's going to happen to season 4? Is there going to be a reduced budget? Are they going to just take their plans for season 4, try to elongate it out a little bit and chop it in half, and instead of having an 8-episode 4th and 5th season, you have 5 episodes for seasons 4 and 5 and quickly wrap everything up? Because like I said at the beginning, I don't know how much material they have left, because simultaneously they're just zipping through all the lore, but when they're not doing that, they're making the most boring show on TV. I have immersed myself over the past week in about as much Lord of the Rings content as I possibly can, because the franchise is great. The source material is tremendous. Like I've stated over and over again, the Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think it's the finest piece of media that has ever been released. The 3 films themselves, you just watch them in totality as they were shot, as they were conceived. It's the greatest story ever committed to film. It's not just the finest trilogy. I think that if you just watch the entire, and we're talking extended cuts, by the way, you watch all 12 hours of content right there, it is better than any show that's being released right now. It is better than any other trilogy that's out there. Hell, it's better than most franchises that are out there. And this right here, there's a reason that I just simply call it Rings of Power, because it bears very little resemblance to Lord of the Rings, even when it's strictly ripping content from any of those films. And even though you buy the lore, it just goes to show, if you don't adapt it appropriately, if you don't pay the correct amount of respect towards it, nobody's going to consider you in that same breath. Even the Hobbit movies look more competent in comparison to Rings of Power. So best of luck for the rest of the season, and best of the luck on the remaining 3.5 seasons, because brother, you're going to need it. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.